Hello, Truth Seekers. There is a recent video circulating of an interview between Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson. Depending on the credibility that you give Tucker, his secret reveal further offers a clue for the great mystery of who or what controls this world. We'll play the clip and I'll chime in.
I said, look, Netanyahu hates you. You know that. They don't like each other at all. The people pushing you toward this would include Rupert Murdoch, who despises you. Trump knows that, of course. Mark Thiessen has always hated you. Ben Shapiro, they hate you. Mark Levin hates you, has always hated you.
Yes.
The people pushing you to, I said this right to his face. The people pushing you to do this want to destroy you. And they're doing it on behalf of Israel, whose goals include getting the United States out of the Middle East. They don't want the U.S. in the Gulf because it strengthens the Gulf.
They don't like our
states.
friendships there.
They don't like our friendships there at all because Qatar and UAE and Saudi, but also Bahrain, Oman, and Kuwait, but mainly those three countries are a massive rival to regional hegemony. You can't run the Middle East with strong Gulf states. And so they want the U.S. out. Israel wants the U.S. out of the Middle East, and they want to degrade those Gulf states. And I said that right to his face. And he said, yeah, I know.
Now, if that was ever a mic drop, we're looking into this topic for the purpose of deciding, do we continue to trust in Trump? And with the 17, there is this post 916, which identifies a nation being, quote, for last. And so really in all this, I'm trying to personally determine if it really is the case that the good guys, if the good guys are actually still in control, or have the good guys been controlled, even 17, the entire time? And hence this language to mislead the public about expected future events. I went to the base interview clip, which was uploaded 3 days ago, because I wasn't sure about when exactly Tucker spoke with Donald Trump. But from listening to the actual clip segment, I couldn't figure that out. He didn't specify. So I asked Grok, was there some meeting Tucker Carlson had with Trump right before the conflict escalation between the U.S. and Iran this year? The answer I got was yes. Tucker Carlson had multiple in-person meetings with President Trump in the weeks immediately leading up to the major U.S.-Iran escalation February 28, 2026, as reported by the New York Times. The escalation began that day with large-scale U.S.-Israel airstrikes on Iranian military sites, leadership targets, and infrastructure, which took out Supreme Leader Khamenei and triggered Iranian retaliation. In detailed May 26 NYT interview, Carlson described flying to Washington 3 times in weeks before February 28th in meetings with Trump, sometimes one-to-one with aides like the chief of staff or secretary of state coming in and out. He had lunch with Trump during one visit and had many phone calls on the topic. He was actively trying to persuade Trump not to launch the war, warning about risks of U.S. troops, energy prices, regional stability, and America's interests. Carlson said that Trump did not seem enthusiastic and appeared resigned, repeatedly asking variations of, do you want Iran to have a nuclear weapon? So I guess that's the key. It's about Iran and nukes. And so I saw this other clip I'm going to show you. As you may know, Prime Minister Bibi did a 60 Minutes piece recently. I'm going to play a segment from that.
So I go to 2016, it's right before the elections, and I meet with Hillary Clinton. And then I meet with Donald Trump in New York. The first thing he says to me in Trump Tower is, we can't let Iran have nuclear weapons. I'm going to walk out of that terrible Iran deal. Jump forward 8 years later, there's another election. I meet President Biden and Kamala Harris in Washington. And then I go and meet Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. And the first thing he says to me, even before I sit down, he says, you know, Bibi, we cannot let Iran have nuclear weapons. I'm not going to let it happen. So he's infused with this mission.
So from the way this is presented, you're led to believe that Donald Trump is deciding these things on his own. Going back to 2016, supposedly, Trump was certain that under no circumstances could Iran have nukes. All right, and we'll go to this segment of the interview.
Trump knows that, of course. Mark Thiessen has always hated you. Ben Shapiro, they hate you. Mark Levin hates you, has always hated you.
So I just wanted to confirm that. Is it true that Mark Levin hated Donald Trump? So I asked Grok, is it true Mark Levin used to attack Donald Trump on various issues several years ago? Yes, it's true. Several years ago, primarily during the 2016 Republican presidential primaries, conservative radio host and commentator Mark Levin was openly critical of Donald Trump and even positioned himself as a part of the Never Trump camp, per Politico. Key examples of Levin's past attacks on Trump. April 2016, Levin explicitly declared that he would not support Trump if he became the nominee. He said, I am not voting for Donald Trump, period, and added, count me as Never Trump. He criticized Trump's campaign tactics linked to advisor Roger Stone as a bully, dirty tricks, Nixonian tactics. He even warned that he might urge his audience not to vote for Trump. Levin was vocal supporter of Senator Ted Cruz during the primaries and directly told Trump to cut the crap over Trump's attacks on Cruz and his family. He warned that Trump's behavior was turning off conservatives. If you just search Ted Cruz and scroll posts, you'll see very clearly what Ted's stance is on the key issue that might be motivating the situation we're in. Ted Cruz isn't worried about the files, our troops, or the rising cost of living. He's worried about
But listen, as Republicans, it's easy for me to criticize the Democrats. I'll tell you, in the last year and a half, we have seen anti-Semitism rising on the right. And we've seen more of it than I've ever seen in my lifetime.
So implicitly, it's quite clear why Mark Levin would be a fan of him. Here, Tucker says that he believes Trump is aware of the long-term consequences of the current military engagement in the Middle East.
And I think he retreated into his happy place as
He thinks that Donald Trump retreated into his quote-unquote happy place. So this is the big question. He later goes on to say that Marco Rubio was put forward to say that the U.S. was provoked into striking Iran initially at the behest of you-know-who. I have to admit the situation is beginning to lean away from Universe 2 and more towards Universe 3 or Universe 1. Amazing synchronicities, as mentioned before, I believe can occur in a natural order type universe, but I believe they are more likely in a universe that is controlled by a sovereign God, or a universe that perhaps isn't, but there is technology to cause the synchronicities, or a universe that is managed by a sovereign God, but also with the technologies existing to control and create synchronicities. So in ways of looking at this, there is a concept of having faith in things unseen. And with that operation, with that method, your focus would be on universes 2 and 3. Then there's the concept of Occam's razor. We're just looking at the most likely probability in a way that makes the fewest assumptions. Through Occam's razor, the fantastical Patriots in control reality becomes a little bit less likely as time goes on and more information is brought to the public. Whether you want to take the more practical approach with Occam's razor or the more faith-based approach, the bias, I believe, does sort of depend on your faith in humanity. But again, in this discussion, as mentioned before, there is a bit darker possibility. We believe that a living God has our best interests at heart, but I do sometimes ponder the possibility of a 3, 2, or 1 universe, but really in likelihood, a 2 universe with a more sadistic, evil, black hat type angle to it. And unfortunately, I'll be very short and indirect in describing this. As you know, there are some who hold belief in this concept of a certain type of special tree, a special magical tree. I'm being very vague and indirect about. There is speculation that that magic tree may potentiate a specific class of individuals, and that we're possibly seeing the manifestation of power caused by that. And this would then lead to special sports outcomes that have symbolic numeric significance to them. We described as gematria indicated outcomes. And some of these outcomes perhaps operating as chum to the freedom-loving patriotic Americans, like, the Kentucky Derby outcome, when somehow the horse named Golden Tempo went past 17 horses in front of it to win the race, leading to a lot of the appropriate, excited posting about its symbolic significance. Since developing my YouTube channel, as you know, certain sources started communicating information to me, supposedly about the secret things going on behind the scenes, promises of true justice involving the Guantanamo Bay location. Some of these sources had invested time in me, but even with trust established, I sometimes don't know how seriously to take what I'm being told. I was actually warned against talking about the people who I speculate could be using some magical principles inherent in the tree of magic that I won't name here to control certain outcomes in reality. I was told talking bad against them can affect one's luck in a negative way. It's kind of a scary principle when you think about it. If you're following me, again, this video was inspired by a recent interview with Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson. It could be that Megyn and Tucker are sold out clowns to Arab GNC nations or to the Iranian IRGC, and that they put out propagandistic points to deceive the patriots. But I also put out the possibility that Tucker's being honest and that Trump actually said, "Yeah, I know," in response to the point Tucker brought up about the various people who did not support him initially, now supporting him because he's going to go in and do the bidding of a foreign power. And the body language piece, which we don't have access to because we're not in a room with Tucker and Trump, but supposedly Trump appearing unenthused about what was to come, but just sort of seemingly trapped in having to act on these orders. Despite the tone of the video so far, I do not tell you this to create fear and a sense of hopelessness. I'm just cutting down the center, trying my hardest to properly discern the story that all the information tells when viewed from different points in time. For U.S. citizens, there are many great things that the Trump administration has brought so far, like no tax on tips, attempts to use tariff revenues to make up for the income requirements of the U.S. citizens, attempts to control improper immigration at the border, attempts to rout out Medicare fraud, and various scams seeking unrequited government funding. Just working with the given information and not factoring in the white hats doing something spectacular over the next 6 months, it would seem that the U.S. is about to lose the midterms to the Democrats this fall. However, if the foreign influence really is such as been told, any political outcome could be predetermined. with the appropriate monetary incentives. So it could be a situation where Republicans are still forced to win. And ultimately, that would be a better outcome so long as election security via the SAFE Act remains a priority. I would predict at this point 4% inflation, possibly higher, leading to an increasingly expensive summer and fall. As far as any mitigating circumstances are concerned, it really comes down to the exercise of free speech and fair criticism. I would predict that the alien disclosures would not take us closer significantly to the key revelations needed for the suppressed energy technologies that would then usher in a golden age. In both conventional politics and this area of science and technology, there are very competitive political forces that are maintaining the status quo. People have to begin to see the big picture as far as the forces that are hindering things and realistically organize to address each specific problem. That might be too tall of an order to ask for, the organization principle. This may then lead to the fallback concept of waiting for an organized military patriot class to save the day. In the end, I would probably conclude that the lack of organization, it slows down progress, but doesn't impede it. And we would probably be much more advanced as a civilization if we were able to organize and remove the bad actors quickly enough. So now the battle is to prevent progress from turning into totalitarianism. I'm still digesting this information, but I do intend to discuss it next. I thank you for your support and consideration. Peace, Patriots.